what do you mean it's boring? I said, well, I've seen this. I have no interest in this, and I'm going to go to the animation department and make a movie. He said, well, look, you stick around, and you come up with one good idea every day.
What George Lucas revealed about Star Wars in a recent interview was absolutely shocking. It wasn't just the lightsabers, hero's journey, or even a side bet he made with Steven Spielberg. Here are 25 shocking facts about Star Wars revealed by George Lucas and company decades later. And you won't believe why Gaddafi almost started a war because of a massive set piece. So, sit back and let's rewind time. Number 1.
What the editor is doing is maybe doing a scene that's 2 or 3 minutes long, and they're selecting out of all these takes and all these camera angles, where do you go in this scene, what do you cut to, and why do you cut to it?
Before there was even a Death Star, there was a woman so talented that she even won an Academy Award for Best Film Editing. This was the wife of George Lucas, Marcia, who became a critical cog in the wheel that made Star Wars flourish. As the story goes, George Lucas often found himself frustrated by the filming, suggesting that it didn't really pop or showcase everything he intended. Even when he was struggling to come up with new ideas, he became frustrated. Yet his wife, Marcia, often stepped in, assisting with ideas, but her true skill came post-filming. Marcia was credited with cracking the plot wide open, more specifically, the Death Star trench run, to add an emotional component that hooked audiences.
Have you not? What? Yahoo!
She later earned an Academy Award for all the hard work. But you won't believe what Steven Spielberg said about it. Number 2. Before Lucas became a powerhouse director, he was involved in The Godfather as an assistant to director Frank Ford Coppola. Here, Lucas learned the tricks of the trade, but when he first created Star Wars, no one believed in it, except for one man. Lucas screened a rough cut of the movie to his director friends, who were unimpressed by its design. Even his mentor, Coppola, said it would be a failure, while Brian De Palma, another director, called it the worst movie ever. This all broke the little confidence George Lucas had left, until Steven Spielberg viewed it. According to reports, he was the only one to predict that it would be a smash hit, and so it happened. Yet before all this, Lucas faced a lot of criticism and rejection. Number 3. You'd think that such an out-of-the-box idea would be picked up by everyone. But when George Lucas approached a variety of studios, presenting his script, he was met with rejection. Almost every major studio, including Universal, Disney, and United Artists, rejected the concept, stating that no one would be interested in such a far-fetched sci-fi movie. But Lucas persisted, digging deeper until he finally came across Alan Ladd Jr. from 20th Century Fox. But even he had concerns about the viability of the film, and only offered Lucas the money thanks to American Graffiti. Ladd Jr. greenlit the film, but not by giving Lucas everything he wanted. In fact, the budget was a major problem. Number 4. For a sci-fi movie like Star Wars, taking the story from paper and turning it into a screen production seemed like a daunting thing. Not only was it going to require a lot of special effects, but lighting and even technology. Unfortunately, Ladd Jr. couldn't help Lucas with the budget, which all came down from Fox. The studio believed that the movie was a delusional idea, but was willing to take a chance on it. Yet to protect themselves, Lucas was only given a budget of $11 million, which was so low that it barely covered the costs of the actors. So, George Lucas himself took a smaller director's fee, hoping to free up a few more bucks to make the film into the classic that he envisioned. Even more, they turned to small figurines and matte paintings for the starry background, while old-school camera tricks allowed them to pull off the unthinkable. So, what did George Lucas get that made him a billionaire? Number 5. Instead of a massive paycheck up front, Lucas made a deal that eventually made him a billionaire. He made a deal that ensured he had all the merchandising rights for the film, including clothing and posters, while the toys were sold by Kenner, paying Lucas 5 cents for every dollar made. Since Fox didn't believe it would be successful, they agreed, and when it blew up unexpectedly, it created a nice little fortune for Lucas. Moreover, he secured the rights for a sequel as well, which further cemented his fortune, and toys began rolling out before Christmas. Today, many of these iconic toys are worth a pretty penny and often sold at auction to collectors. Number 6. Growing up, George Lucas idolized the television and comic book franchise Flash Gordon. When becoming a director, he always wanted to create a movie based on the comics in the series, even approaching the creator, Alex Raymond. Yet, he refused, with no one willing to sell him the rights. And then he decided on the spot that he was going to create his own. So, Lucas began writing the script for Star Wars, coming up with new characters and an even deeper story arc. Essentially, Star Wars is the beautiful bastard child of that failed licensing deal. Number 7. One of the most iconic parts of the entire Star Wars franchise is the opening crawl. No matter which movie you watch, it always opens the same way, with a lot of words running down the screen and giving the viewer some context. Yet the original crawl was absolutely horrible, with Lucas creating 6 long paragraphs, convoluted in such a way that his friends simply couldn't understand. Had it not been for Brian De Palma, the man who called it the worst movie ever, it might not have been so iconic. De Palma actually sat next to Lucas and helped him to rewrite it. But to display it in such a way was even more iconic. Since Lucas didn't have the budget of big movies to use computers, the crew actually filmed it. They used a 6-foot-long piece of black paper with yellow text scribbled on it. The camera then slowly glided over it, with even a small wobble ruining everything. Just to create this first scene is said to have taken the crew an entire day of retakes. Number 8. I'm pretty sure you are wondering how George Lucas came up with perhaps one of the most iconic names for any superhero. Yet, Luke Skywalker was never the first choice, with the original script calling the film The Adventures of Starkiller, as taken from the Journal of the Whills, Saga 1, The Star Wars. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, that is exactly what the audience would have thought, and the name was so long, it didn't even fit on the promotional posters. At the same time, news broke of Charles Manson, the iconic cult leader and serial killer who terrorized the public. To ensure that the film didn't make audiences think of the killer, he quickly changed it from Starkiller to Skywalker. The name stuck and is now the most iconic character in the entire franchise. This is largely thanks to the incredible work of actor Mark Hamill, but it is still truly iconic. Number 9. Despite the great friendship between George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, the two men had a lot of jokes together. But at one point, they became competitive, with neither willing to back their own film. While Lucas was creating Star Wars, Spielberg was directing Close Encounters with the Third Kind. Lucas had so little faith in his own production that he truly believed the Spielberg film would outgross him at the box office. So, the two made a deal that if Star Wars made more money, Spielberg would receive 2.5% of the profits, and the other way around if it didn't. Of course, Star Wars was the #1 grossing movie of 1977, leading to Lucas losing the bet and having to give a massive 2.5% of all Star Wars profits to Spielberg. Perhaps this is why the man had so much faith in the movie. But Lucas had so much stress, he didn't even watch the premiere. Number 10. Even before the movie was released, Fox had gotten to Lucas so much into Lucas that he told everyone it was going to flop. There were so many problems that he had to be on set for every single scene. But when it premiered, Lucas couldn't stand to watch the entire film, choosing to get up midway through and leave with Spielberg to have dinner in Hawaii. When Lucas returned, he was absolutely stunned, with theaters adding more slots, and the name Luke Skywalker turning from a character to a hero.
Well, old Obi-Wan on some damn fool idealistic crusade like your father did.
Sir, if you'll not be needing me, I'll close down for a while.
Sure, go ahead. What is it?
His stress was all for nothing, and he missed the entire blow-up of the movie in mainstream Hollywood. The rest is history. But did you know Freddy Krueger nearly flew an X-Wing? Number 11. Everyone knows the iconic Robert Englund in his role as Freddy Krueger in The Nightmare on Elm Street. Yet his success propelled him to audition for Star Wars, specifically the roles of Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. Unfortunately, Lucas didn't like the audition, not giving him either of the 2 lead roles. But Krueger wasn't bothered, asking his friend Mark Hamill if he'd want to audition for the role of the farm boy. Reluctantly, he accepted. When Hamill then auditioned, Lucas loved it and immediately cast him as one of the lead stars. Today, no one can imagine anyone else playing the role of Luke Skywalker. But who fought for the role of Solo? Number 12. Can you imagine anyone else other than Harrison Ford playing the role of Han Solo? I certainly can't. But before Harrison Ford was the main star, the studio had a lot of big names auditioning for the role. These weren't just up-and-coming actors, but stars like Kurt Russell, Al Pacino, Nick Nolte, Christopher Walken, and even Rambo himself, Sylvester Stallone. Selecting Ford wasn't because he had the best audition, or he even looked like the best option for the role. In fact, while the others were auditioning, Ford helped run the lines for the others, which naturally made Lucas see how much he was invested in the story. This made the decision a lot easier, and by the end of it all, Lucas went with the iconic Indiana Jones actor. But let's see how Jodie Foster's schedule gave Carrie Fisher the role of Leia. Number 13. Let's face it, Carrie Fisher is the only person that comes to mind when you think of Princess Leia. She embodied the role and created a world-renowned character that lived on for decades. But she was never the number one choice, and even George Lucas didn't have her pegged as his lead option. Before Fisher auditioned, numerous hopefuls gave it a shot, including Sigourney Weaver and Glenn Close. Yet, none was as great as Jodie Foster, who had arguably the best audition and could have turned the role into something iconic. Unfortunately, Foster was a little tied up with her Disney schedule, leaving Lucas with no other option but to choose Carrie Fisher. It definitely turned out to be the best option. Number 14. Peter Cushing is nothing short of a legend. Not only had he done some iconic roles, but when he was selected as Grand Moff Tarkin, everyone knew it was going to be a classic. The problem was that the Imperial Army had a distinct pair of boots that often made them all look part of the army. For Peter Cushing, it was devastating and painful. He absolutely hated the boots, complaining about how they hurt his feet, even being too small. So he approached George Lucas and asked him to wear something else, perhaps a pair of fluffy carpet slippers. Lucas reluctantly agreed, and for most of the scenes where his feet weren't visible to the camera, Cushing was wearing a pair of house shoes. Basically, the most powerful man who ordered the destruction of Alderaan did so wearing fluffy slippers. So, who was the original Darth Vader? Number 15.
If this is a consular ship, where is the ambassador? Commander, tear this ship apart until you found those plans.
Orson Welles is widely famous for voicing the character of the Voice of God in a production of the Fireside Theater for the ABC radio network in the 1930s. His highly authoritative voice resonated with fans and would have certainly been powerful enough for the delivery of Darth Vader. For months, George Lucas truly believed that this would be his main star for the role, yet his fame became a problem. Lucas sat down and thought that his voice was so famous, people would easily recognize it, regardless of the special effects. He feared that audiences wouldn't perceive Darth Vader as the villain if his voice was so popular. So, they found the lesser-known James Earl Jones, and the role would propel him to such stardom that he even went on to voice Mufasa in the 1994 Lion King. But creating Darth Vader wasn't easy. Number 16.
And the script described him as some kind of a strange, dark being who was in some kind of life support system, that he was breathing strange, that maybe you heard sounds of mechanics.
You might think of Darth Vader as the brainchild of one man. You might even believe that James Earl Jones was the lifeblood behind the character. But that isn't entirely true, and what many fans fail to realize is that the original Darth Vader was an incredibly complicated character. James Earl Jones was the voice, but he didn't physically wear the suit. This job was given to actor David Prowse, who managed to easily pull it off. Secondly, there was Bob Anderson. He wasn't just around, but the man behind the lightsaber stunts who made it all pop. And finally, there was Sebastian Shaw, the man finally revealed as the face of Vader in Return of the Jedi. This proves just how much work went into creating this amazing and timeless character. Number 17. When Alec Guinness, the star who played Obi-Wan Kenobi, got the script, he completely hated it. In fact, he famously wrote letters to his friends, where he rubbished the script and called it fairy tale rubbish. It was quite a blow to have one of the key stars feel that way about the movie. But when it came to his acting, he was meticulous. In fact, he convinced Lucas to make Obi-Wan wise from the start, being seen as the man who truly understood the Force. This was far better than having him star as a crazy old wizard, resembling more of Yoda than the actual character he was playing. But what about Chewie? Number 18. One very interesting thing is the fact that George Lucas had an Alaskan Malamute dog that always used to ride shotgun with the famous director. Indiana was her name, and she was often seen on set. So, when Lucas came up with the name Chewbacca, he wanted it to be inspired by his dog, but calling it Indiana wouldn't work. So, Lucas chose the Russian name for the dog, Sobaka, slightly modified it, and called it Chewbacca. He certainly became one of the iconic stars, and Han Solo's most loyal, trusted friend. Number 19. The Star Wars Jawa Sandcrawler was one of the most unique vehicles used in the entire movie, but having it on set almost caused an international incident. While it was standing on the edge of the set, the vehicle was mistaken by the Gaddafi-led government as a war vehicle, and the dictator himself threatened war if it wasn't moved. The movie was filmed in Tunisia, but much of the filming took place near the Libyan border, and they believed Tunisia was readying to invade the country. Fortunately, cool heads prevailed, and the vehicle was finally moved to prevent an international incident. But speaking of Tunisia, the rain nearly derailed it all. Number 20. If you want clear weather and a desert, Tunisia is one of the best spots for filming. It sits in the Sahara, and the possibility of rain is very rare. Yet, when Star Wars filming began, the rain gods chose to shock the entire crew. While they were planning, the heavens opened up, and Tunisia experienced its first major rainstorm in 50 years. Not only did it delay production, but equipment got wet, and many of them had to be replaced. But can you imagine a desert planet delaying production simply because it got wet? Number 21. Back to Chewie. You can imagine how warm that suit might have been in the scorching desert heat. But in the 1970s, costume designers didn't know about adding ventilation that could enable some breathability. So they simply gave Peter Mayhew the suit and had him wear it for the entire production. Eventually, the heat got to him, and he became so ill with fever, especially during the compactor scene, that it was nearly delayed. To keep him from suffering, the crew had him sprayed with cold water, wetting the entire Wookiee suit. Then they filmed the trash compactor scene, and with the wet Chewie suit, it just added even more disgust to the scene. But let's have a look at why the rest of the crew almost threw up during the scene. Number 22. One of the most disgusting scenes of the entire film is when the gang must traverse the disgusting trash compactor. You'd think that perhaps they'd have some clean water and use something sanitary to turn the color dark. But George Lucas wanted realism. For weeks, he left the trash compactor without cleaning it, which turned the stench from manageable to just disgusting. The scary thing is that they never even told the crew about this, which made it even worse. So when Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and the rest of the crew entered, the disgust on their faces was real. Reports suggest that Hamill even developed a visible blood vessel in his face due to holding his breath for an extended period. Number 23. Since funding was a major problem throughout the movie, at some point they even ran over the budget. This meant that when they began shooting the X-Wing scenes, they had a problem with costumes. To film the scene, they used miniature figurines, but when showing the pilots in a cockpit, this was a real cockpit. The only problem was that they didn't have any specific pants for the scene, and only the flight jackets were visible. So, next time you see the X-Wing pilots attacking the Death Star, remember that they were comfortable in their gym shorts and flight jackets. Number 24. Let's face it, no one expected Star Wars to be the absolute classic that it was. Even Lucas said it would fail, while most of the cast felt the same way. Back in the 1970s, many theaters had a stay-for-free policy, which meant that once someone paid for a ticket, they could stay in the theater as long as they possibly wanted. They could essentially watch Star Wars over and over again. But with the lines being so crazy, they had to do something. Since many people wanted to watch the film repeatedly, and people were queuing outside, they had to come up with a new plan. This plan involved removing the policy that allowed people to stay in the theater for too long. Cinema has never brought it back since. Number 25. Star Wars is pretty clear that Jedis are the good guys. But what audiences watching the first film didn't know was what to call the bad guys other than stormtroopers. Today, we all know they are the Sith, with Vader being the ultimate Sith Lord. But it wasn't even mentioned once during the film. In fact, the word Sith was popularized following the prequels, more than 2 decades later, with Darth Maul first appearing on screen. Did you notice the omission? Star Wars blazed trails for many movies to come. It led to one of the most iconic parodies of all time, called Spaceballs. The film had the same style, but was far more humorous, and nearly injured the entire cast. Check out this video to find out why.